All right, we are looking at damp, dewy, drippy, moist ghosts. So these are going to be ghosts involving some humidity, I guess. All right. Even before the violence started in earnest. Nah, I don't need to be fancy. Even before this violence started, he noticed something strange when he showered. Kedman, yay, I'm here. Good, Kedman, I'm glad you're here, man. Even before the violence started, he noticed something strange when he showered. There was always a lot of fogging on the mirrors and the glass wall of his shower. Patrick Baylor kept his water hot. Let's say liked his water hot. That's better. Liked his water hot. His skin was often red and tender when he finally stepped out to dry off. And many evenings he didn't move to turn off the water until it started to get cold. Sometimes he wondered if he wasn't trying to burn away the cold blue feelings that hung over his spirit every day. There were signs of haunting before. Little things that were easy to ignore or justify away without much thought. These things started to jump out of his memory as the situation escalated. But it was that last shower in his expensive home the Sunday he left that triggered his fight or flight reaction. The handprints in the moisture formed again. They were large, like a man's hands. They were large like a man's hands. Larger than his. The ring finger on the right invisible hand was bent. Hold on, got a double word there. The ring finger on the right invisible hand was bent as if it had been broken and allowed to reset incorrectly. The prints appeared dark in the field of white humidity over the glass. They seemed to press in harder, even to the point that the sliding door rattled in its frame. Fat drips of condensation ran down from the prints. Patrick grew dizzy as he realized he had stopped breathing. He drew in a deep, hot breath of steam that didn't help him recover his equilibrium. Now, I must say then he felt as if he were burning up. Cooking in the scalding water. All the comfort of that heat turned to weary suffering in his terror. He actually reached out to touch the shape of the hands. Then they slid down the glass, smearing their shape in dark smears. Smearing their shape in dark swatches, and even squeaked loudly down the glass. F this noise. Patrick said as he flung open the door and stumbled through the bathroom, naked and soaking wet. He nearly slipped twice, but kept his feet and tore open the door to his empty bedroom. Part of him thought that if he hesitated. Part of him thought that if he hesitated or fell, that whatever went with those hands and noises would get him. With the shower still going, he dressed in jeans, a sweatshirt, and sneakers without socks. The clothing clung to his undried body. The whole time he prepared to flee, he watched the steam waft out of the bathroom through the door open ajar. More than once he swore he saw the shape of an arm or a leg in the steam. Already his memory pulled up earlier incidents that now made more sense if something was really there. He grabbed up his wallet and fled. Let's say wallet and keys. He grabbed up his wallet and keys from the bedroom and fled with the water still running. Patrick decided to exit through the mudroom so he could turn off the water to the house without having to go in that bathroom again. The valve squeaked. And his eyes darted to every surface, searching for moisture, and then searching for signs of unseen hands. Okay, hold on, let me fix something there. Of unseen hands or fingers painting with the water. Alright. He left out the side door and drove away in an expensive foreign car. He'd send someone to see to the house later. He'd send someone to see to the house later. but he'd be damned if he was going to be the fool to hang around in a haunted house. Two days later, ghost of Alicia would knock out two of his teeth in a pricey hotel suite. Okay. Good stuff. Good foreshadowing, if I do say so myself. That foreshadowing is at least worth $19 million, I'm just saying. All right. 2 days later, the ghost of Alicia would knock out two of his teeth in a pricey hotel suite. Patrick picked himself up off the thick carpet. It was an off brown color that allowed him to easily spot the two chunks of broken enamel and the jelly like blood strung out between him and them. He almost sliced his tongue on, hold on just a second. He almost sliced his tongue on the broken end. He almost sliced his tongue on the broken end of one of those missing teeth. And the air breathed over those exposed sockets and roots, stung with agonizing pain. He recognized Alicia pretty quickly, despite the fact that her form was barely there, outlined in droplets in the air. It was as if the features, it was as if the features of her face and the faint curves of her body were made from the thin wisps of mist that came out of nowhere. Some private fog gave her enough substance take Knuckles to him. He started to speak. But it hurt too much. She moved before he realized she was coming for him again. Patrick was trying to guard his face as he focused on her transparent fists, but she brought a hard, nearly invisible knee up into his chest and drove him backward into the wall. Someone on the other side hammered back, and a muffled voice mumbled out an angry reply that he could not hear. The walls here were much thicker than some roadside motel dive. Patrick might be on the run from ghosts. I say watery ghosts. But he still had the means to run in style. Alicia, if that's you. Uh-oh. My computer freeze up? Okay. Alicia, if that's you, please stop. I didn't even know you were dead. I didn't kill you. I had nothing to do. Say with, that'll give us something to, there we go. Alright, getting an M dash into a story and into quotation marks is always rough. Alright. This time, she kicked him in the stomach. This time she kicked him in the stomach. He saw her leg move just after much of her upper body vanished from the dissipation of the fog over her ghostly skin. Patrick let out a wavering moan. One of her toes had caught him right in the belly button, and the ill pain from it sunk deep. Alright. He doubled over onto his hands and knees. The thick carpet itself depressed in the shape of her small bare feet. Hear a bee outside. Alright, water puddled in those indentions. It also allowed him to track her coming for him again. He didn't need much warning to know that she was coming for more. He twisted his head aside and away. That invisible foot that almost felt soft as it grazed his cheek still caused a terrible rush of pain as she jarred his jaw and his broken teeth. The inside of his cheek sliced deep on the sharp edge. Patrick burst into motion, coming up in an unsteady run. He hit the door as he struggled with the locks that now kept him trapped inside instead of protecting him from anything out there. Okay. He could not hear her running at his back, but he did hear heavy drops of water plopping on the floor. Patrick loosed the final lock and tore out of the room, charging headlong down the hall without his shoes on. He heard the thump behind him and dared to turn. A long, wet splotch formed on the open door near the hinges, where he could still partially see into the room. Water sheeted down the door onto the threshold between the open room and the carpet. Patrick decided to bypass the elevator and run down the stairs instead. He'd drive as far away from here as he could get, but he'd still be found a couple days later. Okay. All right. Alicia was still alive. He called her. She wasn't happy to hear from him. They'd had a nasty breakup, but nothing that should have ended in haunting. Again, the fact that she was alive seemed to preclude it. He had to be mistaken. It wasn't her. He had only caught a glimpse in what the mists had revealed to him. But he had been so sure at the time. Patrick packed more of the white powder into his damaged teeth. He had the money to take care of it for real. But he didn't know what city. Okay, hold on. Let's say sitting in his car on the outer edge of the department store parking lot. Patrick packed more of the white powder into his damaged teeth. He had the money to take care of it for real, but he didn't know what city he would be in. And something told him he didn't want to be sedated in a chair next to sharp instruments when the wet ghosts decided to visit again. He imagined the spirits using the liquid from the dentist's spit sink to form themselves, and then to tear him apart. All right. His jaw and teeth and gums numbed with a buzz that caused his heart to race. He was using more than he should, but there was no prescription for this stuff. Tooth pain was nothing to screw with, though. This stuff helped, but barely. Okay. He watched 2 drops trail down the outside of his windshield. He watched 2 drops. Hold on. Let me fix this. He watched 2 drops trail down the outside of his windshield through the morning dew. He had not slept much the night before. He wasn't sure that running made any difference, but he hated to sit still long enough to find out. As he reached for the wiper switch to clear the window, his hand froze midair. Fear boiled up inside him, either as a warning or as a realization that he was surrounded by fogged windows. Four handprints. Small, like those of young women, formed in the moisture right in front of his face, much like the bigger hands had done on his shower nearly a week earlier. Patrick panicked and scrambled. Patrick panicked and scrambled. He tried to turn on the car, the wipers, and the defrost all at once, but succeeded in doing none of those things. He let out a long, deep breath as he tried again. For the keys hanging from the ignition. Okay. He let a long deep breath as he tried again for the keys hanging from the ignition. He could see his breath like it was a cold day, but the car's interior was actually stuffy from trying to sleep in there over the last few hours. The car's interior was actually stuffy from trying to sleep in there over the last few hours. The single breath. All right, let me make that a new paragraph. Single breath turned into a foggy storm. Armand is here. Good. All right, hold on just a second, Armand. The single breath turned into a foggy storm that wavered. You were napping. Very good. A single breath turned into a foggy storm that wavered back and forth between the seats and blocked out all the world outside. There were two of them. All right. Armand has redeemed to get Jay to tell a fun fact. I'm going to tell an Armand fact, but not an embarrassing one, I don't think. Um, Armand and I knew each other online for a while, and I believe he was experimenting with a publishing company I think was called Rhymefire Books, and he had put out some stuff through them, through that, and for some other authors too. And so I knew him from there. He had done some zombie tours by that point too, I believe. But the first time we met in person was in 2013 in New Orleans at the World Horror Convention. And I think at that time Armand's like online persona was a little different than it is now. He kind of had this sort of wild and crazy horror author mystique about him, and he joked around online, which he does a lot now, but it was more along the lines of almost like he was sort of like a crazy boozing insane author kind of person. And so we at the time in New Orleans, I was running the table for a publisher called Hazardous Press, and they paid for me to go to the convention and sell the books and all that. So it covered a lot of my costs, which I kind of miss now about conventions, but that's how things go. And we were having authors that had books with Hazardous Press come and spend an hour or so at the table signing. And Armand had one of those hours, so I was kind of prepared for this, this wild and crazy guy. And he sat down at the table. He was very professional. He was friendly. He was not reserved, but just kind of quiet and friendly and all that kind of stuff. So that's that hour that we sat there. He sold a few books, and we got some things signed. We were able to talk about just publishing and life and all that kind of stuff. And we had just met at that point. It turned out to be a pretty big turning point for him too, not just meeting me, but in terms of where he was in his career. He was starting to write some different things. And that's when I think the first Chelsea Avenue and Green River Blend and all that was starting to come out, which I always, and I've told him this, I always felt like those were big books for him, and big moments for him progressing in his writing. But then also he had kind of come away from, he was coming out of a period where money was real tight, and he was getting some good returns on some books and some of the Hollywood stuff he was writing. But he had kind of been in a tight spot before that. And at that point, he had just met Shelley, and they had just started dating. And I think he actually borrowed her car to come to New Orleans and then stayed with another author there while I was there. But I just remember that being a big point where we met, and we the first book that we wrote together would be a while after that. But I think even though we knew each other online, I think we really became closer friends at that point, having met in person. And of course, our careers advanced as we went along. We started writing more books together, attending more conventions together, and all that sort of thing. And then, of course, Shelley straightened him out and married him and all that. We fell in love at first sight. There were a lot of people that I met for the first time at that New Orleans convention. It wasn't the first convention I attended. I think I did a local one prior to that, but it was kind of that moment where I met a lot of the people outside my, that I only knew inside my computer and stuff. So that's how Armand and I met. Was in New Orleans right before the heist. All right, so I find that to be a fun fact because I'm glad that I know Armand. All right, there were two of them, both women, both formed out of the supernatural mist that filled the interior of a car that never used to smell this bad. He didn't want to look at them. He just wanted to get away. But unlike the ghost, who wasn't Alicia, let's say this pair of spirits stood out in dark relief. But unlike the ghost that wasn't Alicia, this pair of spirits stood out in dark relief against the fog that surrounded them. Their faces were as clear as sculptures, but these stony faces moved and twisted as they sneered at him. They were stark naked in the negative space they formed in the drifting haze. Every curve and detail was crystal clear as their invisible fingers formed into claws. Let's say curled into threatening claws. All right. I tell you, Armand, I wish I was napping too. There's just something about this 3:15 time that makes me want to fall asleep when I know that there's a stream coming up. So I'll end up falling asleep like a little after 2, and then sleep a while, and then have to wake up all groggy to jump onto stream. I don't think it has anything to do with the time. I just think it's like I know something's coming up, and so my body's like, now we're tired, let's lay down. So it wouldn't matter what time I made the stream. Now, if I didn't have any responsibility coming up, I would just be up and doing whatever I wanted without a problem. Armand says I wrote at 1 and then fought to stay awake, but fell out at 2:45. Maybe it is the time. I think I almost fell asleep too. It'd be like we were napping together, only hundreds and hundreds of miles away. Unlike MondoCon, when we'll be curled up on the couch together. All right, it is prime nap time. There you go. Are we working nap time into the writer's retreat, or is that just a person-by-person basis? All right. Every curve and detail was crystal clear as the invisible fingers curled into claws. Obviously, nap time is important. Nap time is for closers, though, so Chuck will not be allowed to have a nap the entire time he's there. He'll have to sleep sitting up at his computer where he's supposed to be typing a story, where he needs to get 11 westerns done that he already has covers for. Every curve and detail was crystal clear as the invisible fingers curled into threatening claws. And like before, he was sure he recognized them. It was harder to deny, though. Even if he didn't recall the details of their bodies, their faces were undeniable. Stephanie and Mackenzie. They didn't know each other, as far as he knew, and there was no natural way they could track him here. But of course, these manifestations were anything but natural. Like Alicia's spirit from the hotel room when he lost 2 teeth. He had no reason to think these 2 were dead either. Although now he suspected that might not matter. "I'm sorry," he shouted a little too loudly for the closed car. "I didn't mean to hurt either of you." "Whatever I did, I'm sorry." Okay, let's spell sorry correctly. Instead of soothing them, this rushed apology seemed to set them off. They both lunged at him and tore into his face and throat. All right. They both lunged at him and tore into his face and throat. He pawed at the door handle. Say the door lock. I don't know what kind of car he's got. He pawed at the door lock, but Mackenzie seized him by the wrists and pinned his fists against his chest with more strength than he imagined she had in life. Stephanie. Stephanie, okay, I'm going to make this a new paragraph. Stephanie slipped a cord over his head, tucked it up under his chin and then pulled it taut with an audible strain from the material. His airway wasn't completely closed, but spotty darkness mixed with his vision of the drifts of mist passing between his bulging eyes Well, let's start spelling a few things right, shall we? Bulging eyes and the textured ceiling of the car. He could feel Mackenzie's weight straddling his lap. Cords stood out on his neck where he was pinned to his seat by the spirit of Steph strangling him from the back. He started to go and might well have blacked out and Mac not sunk her ghostly teeth into his shoulder, drawing warm blood. Patrick fought and twisted in her ethereal grip without much strength behind it. But the condensation that formed the surface of her palms and fingers was slippery enough for him to twist and slide just enough. He freed his hands and pulled the cord from the divot forming in his throat, just enough to loop it over his head. Mackenzie clawed at him some more, but he got the door unlocked and opened. Before sliding out from under her weight. Patrick tumbled across the asphalt and felt it in his teeth again. He needed another application of his special medicine. But he wasn't going back in there again. He needed no second lessons to know to stay away from haunted things. As his pulse hammered inside his abused throat and skull, he spied Mackenzie on her knees in his driver's seat, growling at him silently. Steph still held the cord in her moist hands in the back seat. It was a striped bungee cord he had used for securing a mountain bike to the back of his vehicle when he took up that hobby for a few months last year. Steph wasn't alone in the back. Clear as day. Clearer than in the hotel room. Alicia sat with her legs crossed and reclined as if she were enjoying the show. ghost of a woman who was most assuredly not yet dead. Patrick turned and ran diagonally through the lot. A couple early shoppers honked. Others on the sidewalk paused to watch him go. Then someone grabbed him. Patrick screamed and tried to struggle, but the officer wrestled him to the ground. Patrick groaned as the pain of the impact focused in in his broken teeth. Before the police searched his vehicle, he was sure the wet ghosts would be long gone, but the powder in the glove compartment would be right there. Patrick knew enough to say nothing, but that got him stuck in a large room with other drunk, high, hungover, and stinking men. He had his own lawyers, so he didn't need a poor public defender, but he had covered a lot of miles and would have to wait a while for the best money could buy to get out to him. The next ghost that swirled into nude existence was a burly old man instead of one of his past wronged girlfriends. Buck Hanzine had a bent ring finger from a machine accident when he was a kid. The stark detail of the mists around Buck were more than Patrick cared to see. A few others looked up and squinted at what they must have thought was a hallucination, because what else could it be? When they looked to each other and saw recognition on others' faces, they started to really get concerned. Buck trailed wet footprints. Buck trailed wet footprints as he approached Patrick on the bench. Whispers spread through the room. What the hell were you doing in my shower, Buck? Patrick's words slurred from the swelling around his mouth and face. The officers who arrested him attributed his injuries to self-affliction. Since he clearly was high and out of his mind, as the blood tests would confirm. It would be hard to explain that bite mark on his shoulder, though. This ghost answered, and though the words could be made out, they sounded like someone had learned to talk while water. You're doing this to yourself. Men scattered from both sides of Patrick. A few fights broke out as frightened prisoners men scattered from both sides of Patrick. A few fights broke out as frightened prisoners who had not yet noticed the watery ghost objected to being bumped or stepped on. Others cursed as they saw Buck's outline in the cleared portion of the group cell, of the holding cell. They're not even dead, Patrick said. Neither are you. You're locked up. You did it to yourself. You knew the risks. You can't blame me. His former partner, who should have been locked away in a more private cell hundreds of miles away, gargled out, "I'm not doing this. You are punishing yourself." Then I command you to go away. The ghost gargled, and water splattered on the growing puddle in front of the bench. Patrick now had to himself. The room was awash of shouting and noise from all the men crowded against the opposing wall and far corners. A few stood on benches and screamed in much higher registers. Officers outside of the metal door and shouted for the inmates to clear out. They did not move from their spots as they watched Patrick talk with the ghost. All this noise made Buck hard to hear and understand. But the ghost said, "You brought me here." The doors flung open, and a half dozen officers came in swinging. The prisoners did not resist. They hardly looked at the officers at all. Then even the cops stopped in place and stared. A body made of water and flooding the cell held Patrick Baylor against the wall with his feet dangling over the wet floor. The ghostly tower of water seemed to be growling. And slammed the back of Patrick's head against the wall over and over, long after Patrick had blacked out and a splattery smear of blood and hair spread out on the wall behind him. All right.